Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Whew, I hope you enjoyed that lovely Brutal OSC as we have returned with the semi-finals of the uThermal 2v2 circuit January 2025 edition. Here we go. For those that are curious, this is the first of many monthly tournaments featuring the 2v2 format. Shout out to uThermal, shout out to uThermal's community as well, to his audience for, of course, sponsoring, for hosting, for funding the event. So big shout out to the people out there, of course. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's something a little bit different. We're so used to featuring 1v1 here on the CranKy Ducklings or in StarCraft in general. The team game aspect has been, unfortunately, very much so ignored for quite some time. It's definitely been kind of been lurking in the background. Is obviously popular, you know, a lot of people do play team games, are a lot of fun, but never has really been taken too seriously in the competitive setting. Every now and then we have some show matches, every now and then we feature 2v2s in some way, shape, or form. It used to be back in Pro League as well, way back when, but yeah, did never really kick off in the competitive setting, in the competitive field. But now that we're in the twilight years of StarCraft, for whatever reason, there has been interest gained once again into something different. And it might just be because it's refreshing. Like, we've been casting and covering 1v1 StarCraft for so long that maybe just experiencing a different version, a different kind of phase of the game, it's just yeah, something different and very refreshing, and it just scratches that itch of StarCraft, but a very different form of StarCraft. You could argue that maybe that's also why StarCraft Evolution popped off as well. It's just a different way to enjoy the game, and a little bit less serious, a little bit less competitive, but enjoyable nonetheless. Let's go. Let us embrace it. First things first, we do have the semifinals. We're going to be covering both semis and the grand finals as well. Up first is going to be Clem and Trigger up against HeRoMaRinE and Statis. Both uThermal and Goblin, they're going to be having a break here. We were featuring them all up until the semifinals, and they did make it here to the semis based off of their performances. But we have, of course, the other half of the bracket that has been unfolding as well. I want to say that the big surprises coming into this is Gabe and Statis. Despite the fact that Gabe, of course, is a big name, he's one of the best Terran players in Europe, Statis less so. I believe Statis is GM, but he is not as well known as some of these other competitors. Even amongst the more mid-tier Protoss players in Europe, Statis, he is still far below them. So it was surprising to see them doing well, and we will see why they've been doing well. They, of course, have been strategizing, and they have been implementing their own version of Terran and Protoss, and it's been quite effective. We'll see how effective, though, it's going to be against Clem and Trigger. Clem and Trigger, they are one of the heavy favorites, of course. Clem being the best player in the world, and Trigger, of course, alongside him, arguably being the best player in the Americas. We did feature a show match recently between Estrella and Trigger, and Trigger, he looked very impressive, at least in the PvP against Estrella. So Trigger, he has been improving a lot. For those who do not know, Trigger, he is in South Korea. He has been in Korea for 6 months. Oh, coming up on 7 months, I think. Like the Trigger, he's been in Korea for quite some time, has been improving so much and looking so good in that 1v1 format. But what about 2v2? What about the 2v2 formats? We're about to find out. Let's go. As we are jumping into game number 1. He's going to cast both, I believe. Yes. Going to be casting 3 more series here this morning, before going to bed and before getting rest and waking up for some more StarCraft and some more casting. Let's go! As spawning in the top left-hand corner of Emerald City, we have the Canadian Protoss, we have the French Terran. Together, we have a Trigger and Clem. Here we go. And spawning in the bottom right-hand corner, we have their opponents. We have the purple Protoss player alongside the teal Terran. It is HeRoMaRinE and Statis. Here we go. We have a mirror matchup. Let's go. We have Terran and Protoss versus Terran and Protoss as well. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the first mirror matchup that we've had here tonight. Of course, the matches, they've all, in a way, blended together for me. All blended together. We'll see how they do compete, how they do compare. Now, I believe Statis was streaming his POV at the time, and something that we did see out of both Statis and Big Gabe is their team unity, is their teamwork, of course, and Statis typically embracing Mass Phoenix, typically going into Mass Phoenix, and Gabe typically going to be directing him, getting into his own bio style, of course, as well. They have mixed it up and gone into all-ins, they've gone into more macro play. I'm curious how they will approach this. Likewise, I haven't actually seen much of Trigger and Clem. I do know that they have been playing as a duo in the Wardy Team League matches, in the Wardy 2v2 events, but I haven't had the luxury of actually casting or watching those matches, so I don't really know how they work together as a duo. I know they have a lot of experience just because they've been playing and competing a lot together, but I'm curious to see how that all comes together here. We'll see. But now it is going to be, speaking of, I mean, this is already like a very nice start. We have a Trigger going for the gas here at the natural. Now, you can share control in 2v2s or in 3v3s in team games. You can share control, and you can do things like this, where you can throw down a gas geyser, and your opponent can mine from it. Let's go. So yeah, this is like a nice little twist to things, and something you don't really see too often. The evolution of the 2v2 meta, and cute little things like this that you can actually pull off. There are, of course, other aspects of 2v2, such as sharing resources. That's something that we haven't really emphasized too much here today yet. I don't think that it's really been too applicable in a lot of these matches that we've been covering, but that is also another feature, of course, is you can share resources as the game progresses. You can share resources, you can share control. Because we have confirmation that they are sharing control, it means that at any moment you could see Clem controlling an army, you could see Trigger controlling an army instead from the opposing race. As we have double Stargate. Yeah, double Stargate here from our Protoss from Statis. It is going to be Mass Phoenix from our purple Protoss. So Mass Phoenix here. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have Reaper Hellion Aggression out of Gabe. Gonna try to keep the opposing duo busy while the Phoenixes bank up. And again, Phoenixes, they do so well in 2v2. They're just they do such an amazing job at harassing, at wreaking havoc, dipping in between the bases, and typically you rely on your opponent to defend against any kind of ground aggression and ground commitment from the opposing players. For a long time, Mass Phoenix was the go-to. Back in the day, we used to have 2v2s in the StarCraft clan wars as well, and I do recall a lot of Mass Phoenix there. It's been a couple of years, but don't think the meta of 2v2 has evolved too much over the years. As Gabe gets across the map, does take down 3 SCVs, not bad. Takes down the SCVs, does slow Clem down. The Phoenixes are revealed. Now both Clem and Trigger are aware. I mean, they were able to scout earlier. Phoenixes into the main. Clem not quite in position. The SCVs are going to be going down. Getting one, getting two. Two SCVs do fall. Statis, he pulls out. Does pull out. But right, I was meant to get into it. I believe Gabe and Statis, to get to the semifinals, they took down the Laser Geralt duo, and they took down another duo as well that was quite impressive. But they brought down Elisa, Laser Geralt. Oh, they took down Jumi. That's it. Who was Jumi playing with? I think it was Jumi and Yan Yakov. That's it. So they took down Jumi and Yan Yakov alongside Laser and Geralt to make it to the semis. So they've already proven their worth and taken down some big teams. Some big boys. Oh. Sphinxes, they threaten to dive into the main. Reapers likewise testing the waters here at the natural. And we have more Stargates on the way, more Phoenixes getting up to triple Stargate production. Phoenixes, they go for the dive, they shut down the Cyclone. Cyclone is going to go down. Gets the one. Trading a Cyclone for a Phoenix. Statis pulls back. Does pull away. Likewise, Gabe getting his own third TC. Building up his bio. Statis is setting up for a third base. She's just building up purely Phoenixes. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe in this setup, Gabe is giving excess gas to status to be able to afford all of this. So as he dips in. Picking up a couple of key units, pulling away. We're up to how many Phoenixes so far? 10. So far 10, soon to be 13. Fleet beacon on the way for Phoenix range. As he continues to threaten the bases. We can see Trigger trying to catch out those Phoenixes. Let's go. Trigger, he's hunting for the Phoenixes. He doesn't quite catch the reinforcements. And the Phoenixes, they just dive in. Yeah, they collapse on Clem. And Trigger, he's out of position. He's not at home to defend. Ay, ay, ay. And with that, Clem's army being bullied. We do see Gabe reinforcing as well with purely Marine, with one tank. As we mentioned before, is I believe giving excess gas here to Statis. One Phoenix goes down. Army coming from behind. Collapsing on Trigger. Up. Okay, taking out a couple of Stalkers. Likewise getting picked off as well. Trigger, he gets caught out. And the armies for Trigger and Clem, they are lacking. As they were picked apart. Stalkers, they get lifted. Marines as well. And Gabe will knock down the expansion. And the CC is under fire. Oh, good. The max Phoenix. How many Phoenixes do we have? 17! 17 Phoenixes. Taking down the tank. There's nothing to stop Gabe. Gabe, he can now stim in. Archon falls as well. Yeah, and Trigger and Clem, they're just being overwhelmed. They cannot keep up. The Phoenixes, they just keep going. He doesn't stop. Is somewhat running out of energy at least. But he's going for the medevacs. Going for the medevacs, picking up one of the tanks as well. Still efficient trades here from Statis. And Gabe, the tanks are now within range of the CC. Of the bases. So the boys are being pulled. They have to be. Mass Phoenix can't really do much here. As again, they have no energy. Trigger and Clem, they hold. Whew. They do hold on. They force Gabe and Statis back. At least for a moment. Trigger, his economy has been untouched. He's mass expanding. But it's Clem who's in trouble. As Clem has been losing everything. Yeah, the medevacs, the cyclones, the tanks. Down to a handful of Marines. Stuck on 2 bases as well. Clem just doesn't have an economy. Trigger can feed him, true. Can give him resources. And they survive. They hold. It's now time to harass. Oh no! Oh no, as these bases are completely exposed. Workers are going down, and Gabe rotating that direction as well. As they do get eyes on the expansions. Now, Statis does have to be careful with how and when he uses these lifts, as he is running out. Ooh, full medevac goes down. But Trigger, he's being punished. As the Stalkers are lifted, Clemmy comes into support. Shuts down 2 of those Phoenixes. Likewise, Gabe just doesn't really have enough to keep going. Takes down the Archon. Stemming in towards the Mineral Lines. Catching out more Stalkers. Yeah, sniping more probes. Once again, just pulling Trigger and Clem apart. It's one of those things where in a head-on fight, these Phoenixes, they can be targeted down, but they're just so mobile. They're so flexible. Once again, pulling away. Just so much freedom between the bases. Eventually, Gabe's drop is going to be cleaned up, but it's been more than worth it. As the dust settles, looking at the worker counts here. Trigger, his probe count is still quite high. 77 probes, impressive. He's been making non-stop workers. But do you see what I see? The sky toss. The era of the Mass Phoenix has come and gone. And now here comes the Mass Carrier. And this is how you 2v2. Meanwhile, Clem lifting up his main, going for the gold. I mean, that's all that Clem can do here. He has to try to maintain himself, going for the gold. Jumping across the map. It's gonna be cleaned up. Not the worst trades here from Clem. Takes down a couple of Phoenixes. Meanwhile, HeRoMaRinE trying to hold on by himself, but he has a wall of tanks. And so far, Gabe is keeping up. Does reposition the tanks. Oof. Tank boys going off. The carriers, they have arrived. And they reveal themselves. Marines, they can trade well here, but again, the carriers are not on their own. They have support. Interceptors are falling. But Gabe, he stims in. Upgrades are even between the two Terrans. Gabe just finishing up +2. So Gabe, he is ahead in upgrades. Storm is on the way for Trigger, but he needs more time. And both Gabe and Statis, I mean, they're close to maxing. Gabe stepping in. Storm is going to finish. Oh. Ah, no, as Clem, he just can't mine. Clem, he just wants an economy. His main base is going to be hunted down. Remember, that was the main that was floated over. The SCVs are somewhat safe, but they can't really do much out here. There's not much that can be done. Clem going for a Desperation Doom drop. He's moving out. And he does leave Trigger here on his own. Trigger, can he hold? As he's up against two armies. Storm is revealed. Clem going for the gold. And do we see a recall? Do we see that? There it is. He does recall back home. So it's going to be Clem versus Gabe here across the map. And Statis versus Clem. The tanks are exposed. Storm going to be going up. But Gabe is going to be forced back. Trigger, he holds. He shuts down the Terran army. Likewise, Statis also shuts down the Terran army as well. As he does focus on all the tanks. The Marines, again, they do trade well against the interceptors. Clem, he busts in. So with Trigger and Clem coming out ahead. But the armies are still terrifying. And Clem, he cannot rebuild. This is all he has. As he's on half a base, barely half a base economy. And Clem is running out of C, Medevacs full, Marines as well. Trigger just sending it right down mid. Nice Storms. Storms, they pop off on the Pio. But likewise, Trigger is also running out of reinforcements. Trickling in with a couple of Archons. The carriers are there back. Clem was dealt with, now it's only Trigger. That's only Trigger left. And again, the drop wasn't too bad if only Clem had an economy, as he has to lift his mate. He has to live his natural floating over. Clem, he has 0 income. Trigger likewise trying to maintain himself. And this is the death blow of a carrier count that cannot be dealt with. Not without your own Sky Toss at least. Like, even Massbling Stalker can struggle against this. How many carriers? 18! 18 carriers! This is one of those armies that you right click, you A move towards the top left hand corner of the map, and you just walk away. You just walk away and you let them do their thing. Ah, no. Not like this. Say this takes down 2 bases, he can just keep going. There's no reason to stop. Unless Gabe needs help back at home. Trigger diving in. Takes down a tank, takes down 2. Nice Storms. Trigger, he is pushing through. But with the reinforcements, Gabe, he has enough. Gabe, he has enough. He defends back at home. GG gets called as the carriers, they bust into the bases. And Gabe and Statis, they take game number 1. GG. GG, well played. They do take a lead in the series. And again, they just did so well early on with the Mass Phoenix, just harassing, just picking both players apart, getting a lead early on. They were able to mass expand behind it, get there in third bases, they're in fourth bases, tech up into Skytos eventually. So again, a very successful style here out of Gabe and Statis. And we'll see, we'll see how Clem and Trigger respond, as Clem, he is switching to his main race. Let's go. Clem, he's switching things up, and Clem, he is going to be going into Protoss instead. Double Protoss from Trigger and Clem. Let's go. The main races are out, spawning in the top right-hand corner, top left-hand corner. We have the new and improved duo here. They struggled as Protoss and Terran, but now they're back as double Protoss. We have Clem and Trigger. And spawning in the bottom right-hand corner, we have their opponents leading the series 1-0. We have Statis and Big Gabe. We go. Here we go. Now, what's interesting here, I do think that this is a response to the Mass Phoenix. Like, take into consideration here that if Statis was to go into Mass Phoenix again, we could see both Clem and Trigger both focus on their own, either Skytos production or one player going Phoenix, the other going Blink Stalker, having a more mobile composition with earlier Blink and earlier Phoenixes, and they can have an easier time rotating between the bases and working together to shut down Statis. So this may just deter the Mass Phoenix style. Oh. Oh no. Gobslin. Not like this. I remember. But I'm just curious, Goblin and uThermal, they were casting this on their own respective channels. Likewise, shout out to Indy, shout out to TKL. Indy was casting in Polish, TKL in French. Steadfast in English. They roll over it. Let's go. Let us go. So now we are going to be settling in. God's like, how do I observe? It'll be fine. It'll be fine. As for the time being, we do have our standard opener here by Statis, going for the Gate Cyber into Nexus. Likewise, we have double gas from Gabe going into a faster factory instead. Okay. So we do have a very different setup, a little bit safer here overall, getting to a later expansion. Meanwhile, across the map, with our double Protoss, what are we getting into here? We have a more economic opener out of Trigger, going for a Gate Cyber Nexus, or Gate Nexus into Cybercore. Likewise, same from Clem. So economic openers here by both Clem and Trigger. And what is the tech of choice going to be? We have a Twilight Council from Clem, going into Blink. Going into Blink Stalkers. Clem said main race. I mean, Clem, he's the highest rated Protoss player in Europe, so true. He's embracing his main race. Let's go. He's no longer denying who he is. What is he? Protoss. Oh, no. We're here for it. We're ready for it. Let's go. This is why 2-2 sucks. Skytos is so lame. I mean, we see Skytos in 1v1 as well, but yes, that is the meta. Like, the reality is, we mentioned it before. I mean, traditionally, don't know if the meta has shifted over time, but traditionally the meta is Mech and Skytos. Like, there's a reason why Terran and Protoss as a duo are considered the strongest race in 2v2, or the strongest team composition, where we have one player going Mass Phoenix into Skytos, and the other player going, like, Hellion into Mech. Last game, we did see that Gabe didn't play Mech, he played Bio, and once again, we have a Rax, we have an eBay, it is going to be Bio out of Gabe, so he is taking a different approach here. Then is what, you know, considered to be, you know, like the optimal compositions. I don't know how much truth there is in that anymore, because again, that's a little bit outdated. It's been a long time since like 2v2 has been at the forefront of people's minds. And the more 2v2 that gets played here, I mean, I would imagine the meta will shift over time. You know, players will figure out what works, what doesn't, what is stronger than other compositions, of course. And then players will kind of shift in that direction. typically how metas are formed. Typically. As we have Blink on the way instead. Interesting. So Twilight Council into Blink Stalkers out of Statis. This time avoiding the Phoenixes. As we mentioned, just because of the double Protoss duo, I would imagine he's deterred from that. Just because of the sheer amount of gateway units and Blink Stalkers are going to be. Speaking of Trigger, he's going to be working towards Charged Archon instead. Interesting. So no Phoenixes, no Blink Stalkers. At least not from the side of Trigger. Clem rushing to a faster third base. And we do have a bit of a lull here. We do have a bit of a more passive start. As both players are building up. Statis getting ready for a third base. Throwing down extra gateways. Interesting that Statis, he walls up here in the main. Does wall off the main base of Gabe. You love to see it. I mean, it also means that I believe he will be able to warp in on the left-hand side as well, defensively if he needs to. And here comes the move out. Here comes a committed move out. Stim is about to finish. +1 is done for Gabe, so this is going to be a +1 timing. So by Clem holding the line. Nice kiting. Picks up a couple of units. Oh, Statis moving in. Chargels, they come into play. And they collapse on the Stalkers. The tank is unsieged. Yeah, Gabe gets caught on siege. Stalkers get forced back. And both Trigger and Clem, they shut down this push. They take down the tank as well. Remember, there was no medevac support. Gabe losing everything. And Statis, he just runs. He races back home. Clem and Trigger, they have momentum on their side. They can't keep pushing. They have their own war prisms. They can reinforce across the map. There is the one tank on the high ground. There's that one tank. Gabe and Statis, they're holding on. Attempt to take their third bases. But again, Gabe, he barely has an army to work with. And Clem and Trigger, they do rotate over towards the Protoss. Gabe not quite in position to defend. Not quite in position. Gonna be diving in. The tank gets unsieged. Oh, the tank does unsiege, gets caught out. Tank does fall. But last, there is enough here to fully break through. Clem busting into the main, going for the Zealot Warp in. And just pulling Gabe apart. SCVs are going down. Third base gets denied. Third base is cancelled. And both Gabe and Statis are just stuck on a 2-base economy. Meanwhile, both Clem and Trigger getting their thirds. Third bases are either saturated or on the way. Oh. Clem, he does get punished. Bleeds out some Stalkers. Yeah, it's gonna be all or nothing for Gabe. For Gabe and Statis. The blue team, true, Team Blue. Blue team, they're moving out. I mean, they're committed. As the game progresses, they're going to be outscaled. Zealots, they drop back into the main once again. The prism goes down. Can they break through? See the red team setting up. Clem and Trigger. They have extra warp-ins. They've got their Archons. Drew trying to dive. Oh, prism goes down. Nice pickup. War prism does fall. But again, there's just not really much bio here to protect, to keep pushing. Yeah, the tanks are targeted down, they do fall. And once again, Trigger and Clem, they overwhelm. GG gets called. And Clem and Trigger, they fight back, they put a point on the board. GG. GG, well played. Again, a much stronger initial defense when it comes to the double Protoss composition to shut down the initial move out, to snowball from there, and to just contain Statis and Gabe the entire time. Again, as opposed to game number 1, there was just barely any harassment, barely any aggression, barely anything to really slow down the Protoss duo's economy, and with that, they were overwhelmed. And that leads us into the ace match. And the question becomes, do we still commit You know, once Clem has had a taste of the Protoss, they've had success with it, does he go back to Terran or does he commit with more Protoss? We're here to find out as we're loading into game number 3, and we have the answer. It is, in fact, still going to be double Protoss. Here we go. As spawning in the top left-hand corner of a Crimson Research Lab, I believe we're loading into this map for the very first time here tonight. We have the red team. We have Trigger and Clem. And spawning in the bottom right-hand corner, we have their opponents. We have the blue team. We have the duo of Statis and HeRoMaRinE. So once again, double Protoss against Terran and Protoss. We saw that, again, with a less active style, our blue team had a little more, didn't quite have as much success. We'll see if we do try to revert back and go into Phoenixes and try to be active and get into mineral lines. This is a much larger map of the map pool, I should point that out as well. This is our first time casting on Crimson Research Lab, and we have some very open natural bases. Jesus. We have a shared main base into a shared natural, but very wide open, very vulnerable, as the ramp coming into the base is very wide, I should emphasize. Likewise, we have our third base on the left hand side. There are some rocks to at least protect, to at least buy some time. Meanwhile here, both players, they could actually still expand forward towards this low ground setup here. Interesting kind of map format is what I will say, very unique, but once again, very large, very wide open, a lot of open spaces, a lot of vulnerable locations in the center of the map, can deter some big fights. We'll see how how our players do approach this, how they adjust. Gate expand here from Statis, if not earlier Nexus, actually. My apologies. Looks like Nexus first. Meanwhile, double gas opener out of Gabe, going for the racks into factory into a more delayed CC. But yeah, it looks like Nexus first, which is why the natural of Statis is finishing up and the natural of both Trigger and Clem are still on the way. So these are still economic openers by Trigger and Clem, it's just even greedier by Statis, which I do appreciate on a larger map like this. So the greed is real. The first gateways are finishing up into a depth harass, and it's going to be on both Trigger and Clem to try to punish the greed of Statis. As Statis says, his cybercore is still on the way. Like that's just how greedy he was. He's crazy. Still in production. We have our tech of choice, going to be a Twilight Council opener here out of Clem. Twilight Council out of Clem, and Stargate from Trigger. So they do mix it up. Going for one and then the other. Meanwhile, Status, he has enough money for a double Stargate. Okay. It's going to be a double Stargate Mass Phoenix opener here out of Statis. We're going back to basics, back to game 1. I mean, hey, they had a lot of success with it. But again, how do they fare against a double Protoss team? Nobody wants to play 2v2 because Sky just ruins it. I mean, what do you mean? Everyone is playing 2v2. This is a very successful event. I mentioned it before, but there were, what, over 100 competitors? Or around 100 players, participants in this tournament, which was crazy. A lot of interest, which was really cool to see. So there we go, Phoenixes are on the way. But even if you personally don't enjoy playing it yourself, there was clearly a lot of interest in competing in this event. And even more so. Again, as we mentioned before, there's a reason why 2v2 is kind of back in the forefront of people's minds, is because team game tournaments have been a little bit more on the rise when it comes to Warriors events, and now this circuit as well, which is really cool to see. Really cool to see interest returning once again, both viewer-wise and competitor as well, as the Phoenixes are building up. When it comes to the Stargate opener from Trigger, it's only for the Oracle. Interesting. So Oracle opener into a switch into ground toss instead. So it's not going to be Phoenix versus Phoenix. Status, he will maintain that air control, making 3 Phoenixes at a time. That's a lot of Phoenixes. As he's moving out. From the side of Gabe, he is going into Biotank. It's going to be a 2-1-1 setup. Into Stim, into Metamax as well, into an eventual move out. And we'll see what Status can get done. Well, Status, he is denied. So far, I mean, I do think that this is one of the big reasons why both players did play Protoss. With both players going Stalker like this, they can keep up with that Stalker harass a lot easier. And instead, they actually just counterattack. They actually just move out. The Phoenixes, they do nothing. Oh! Mind shot goes off. Nice connection. Clem not quite paying attention. Takes a shot to the face. Back at home, are we set up for this, though? There are a lot of Phoenixes, that is true, but defensively, Phoenixes, they're a little bit less than ideal. They need support. First Phoenix goes down, trades 1 for 1. Stim is not ready for Gabe. They commit. They commit to the fight. Nice start stepping here out of Gabe. Does start to step forward. Most of the Stalkers, they get lifted. And they will shut down this army. Yeah, the Stalkers all go down. Yeah, very nice engage here. Even without Stim, I mean, the lifts, they help out. Status and Gabe, they take the fight. And now it's time to counterattack. And can they shut down this third base? As again, both Trigger and Clem have been greedy. They both took their third bases. They have the greater economy. And it's time to send it. But there's no way in. They have to knock down those rocks. There we go. Drop into the third. The drop comes in. Well, Phoenix is a little bit too premature there. There we go. Coming in together. Massive Stim here from Gabe. Takes out the Stalkers. Oh, do we have any lifts left? Not quite. Yeah, Trigger and Clem, they hold, they defend. They shut down the push. And they save the third. And with this, they have a greater economy. Status is now getting his own third. Phoenix is moving out. Stalkers are somewhat in position. Oh, going for the feedback. Let's go. Feedback going off. From here, Status, he backs up, building up his army. 4th Stargate on the way. He's building up. We have Storm here from our Protoss, from Trigger. Let's go. I mean, again, what's important here, despite going into these mass Phoenixes, there was a much stronger fight initially here from Statis and HeRoMaRinE. What about the economies, though? What about the worker count, the economy, the bases, the probes for Trigger and Clem? As they are getting out of hand. So far, untouched. That's typically one of the strengths here of Mass Phoenix, is harassing. And they have been denied. I want to see 4-player Blink Stalker battle. I don't know if there's much interest in 4v4s. We mentioned before that I know that Wardy has been hosting some 3v3 events, but I think 4v4 can get a little bit excessive. It can also be harder to find teams, just because, of course, you require an extra person. So it can be difficult to fill out teams. And of course, you have the issue of the game not being very optimized, and 4v4 like maxed out armies can absolutely just destroy PCs. Like, it's seeing, like, you know, multiple players going mass sky toss with all the interceptors on the field at once. Yeah, not the most optimal game mode, unfortunately. 4-player setups. So you can't just, like, tank someone's frames with that. So I don't think there's too much interest in at least 4v4. But right, sorry, You're referring to like 2v2 Mass Wing Stalker. We'll get there one day, maybe. But now, Mass Phoenix. How many Phoenixes does he have? 34. Jesus. 34 Phoenixes. Mass EMPs. Oh, the storms are brutal though. Oh my god. Storms, they pop up. They zone back the army. Meanwhile, nice lifts here on Clem. Clem is being shut down. Nice avoiding of the storms. But the Bio Army does crumble. Gaby gets cleaned up. Now it's just purely Phoenixes. The Phoenixes are going to be forced back. The Archon gets a lot of shots off. Yeah, very close fight. Very close engage. Some nice EMPs towards the end. And it looks like the blue team will barely clean this up. Oh god, no! Oof. Massive Archon shots. At the same time, Clem with the warping into the main may have lost his main army, but he takes down the main base of Statis. Yeah, the main goes down. Likewise, Zelt's here towards the third base as well. Economy's being crippled. And Statis, he just wasn't quite ready for this. Didn't notice at the time. Statis falling behind, still does maintain a pretty large army. But the economy's not there. Not anymore. Down to 1.5 bases. Meanwhile, Clem is on 4, going for the gold. As we mentioned before, even though some of these trades have been going the way of Team Blue, the red team, their bases are untouched. Like their bases, their economy, getting out of control. Gabe and Statis are that much more committed. Storm's going to be zoning. Oh, the Phoenixes, they dive in. The Archons, they punish. Oh my god. The Archons and the Storms. The Phoenixes are being dealt with. With that, Clem and Trigger, they're taking the fight. They're forcing back Gabe. Forcing back Stasis. They're holding their own. Nice lifts. But what's concerning to me, though, is that as the Phoenix count gets lower, it's not being rebuilt. It's not being rebuilt. Not anymore. Status, he plummets in supply. It's turning into a 1v2. It's just Gabe all on his own. There's 2 Phoenixes, but that's all there is. And Gabe, he can't do this on his own. He's trying, though. Snipes going off, fighting his heart out. Doing what he can. The storms are brutal, and once again, Status, he's down to nothing. Down to a couple of workers. No army. Gabe doing everything he can to survive. Oh my god, the storms are still insane. And again, he's fighting 2 armies here. There's only so much he can do on his own. As they'll say, tap on top of the army, they get on top of the ghosts are getting picked off one after the other. They're not saved. And GG gets called. Trigger and Clem, they will take the series 2-1, advancing on to the grand finals. GG. GG, well played. A very dynamic back and forth here, as both Stasis and Gabe, they did force the ace match, and even in this game they had some very nice fights. Unfortunately, they weren't able to really get much behind that, despite winning engagements in the center of the map. By the time they got across the map to hit some of these bases, there are plenty of reinforcements. Part of this is also the size of the map as well, because of how large Crimson Research Lab is. By the time the army goes from one end to the other, there are warp-ins, there are reinforcements. Clem and Trigger, they were able to survive, able to maintain their bases, their economy, and bounce back in that game. GG. GG, well played. Of course, the game-winning move was the Zealot warp-in into the main base as well, catching Status completely off guard. Both Status and Gabe were caught off guard. And with that, Status lost his economy, lost his bases, lost his production as well, and it very quickly turned into a 1v2 as a result. As Gabe, he was on his own after that, and couldn't keep up against both Clem and Trigger. GG. GG, well played. With that, we have our first finalists here. Our first team moving on into the grand finals, and we're here to find out who will join them in those finals. Is it going to be the duo of uThermal and Goblin, or Max Pax and Spirit? Let's go.